Today we're going to look at a whole lot of examples of interest groups, and we're going to look at different types of interest groups to see what's different about them, see how we can keep some of them straight in our head here. What you see here is one of the more famous interest groups. You've probably definitely heard of it and maybe not realized it is an interest group, but the AARP is the American Association of Retired People. This is an interest group specifically for old people. You can tell because they're having a great time just having a hot air balloon party here. But we're going to go through all different types of interest groups and talk about some of the differences between them, talk about some of the problems that interest groups face. Our objective today, we are going to compare the different types of interest groups. We're going to look through all different types. We're going to talk about policy groups. We're going to talk about groups that represent a profession or a group of people, big groups, small groups, all kinds of different groups. And we want to make sure that we can explain how they influence policy effectively. The same strategy is not going to work for all groups. So we're going to look at a bunch of different types of groups so that we're best able to figure out how they're going to approach influencing policy. So the question we'll answer today is, what different types of interest groups can influence policy? First up today, we'll talk about the difference between potential groups and actual groups. So we will be able to see what kind of problems may be faced by bigger groups here. What we see in the background here, you see this is a gathering of people who are members of PETA, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. Now, the potential group here is anybody who thinks that animals should be treated ethically. But the actual group would be the kind of people who are actually participating in these activities. So let's take a look at the differences between potential groups and actual groups. The potential group is made up of every person that could possibly benefit from what the interest group is doing. Everybody out there is part of hundreds of different potential groups. You are a part of hundreds of different potential groups because there are interest groups out there that are working for the types of changes that you want to see. There are interest groups out there that are representing your interests, but you're probably not a part of those interest groups. You're probably not working for those interest groups. Anybody who shares a common interest with the interest group is a part of what we call the potential group. Potential group is huge for most interest groups here. But the problem with interest groups is that all of the people in the potential group are not ever a part of the actual interest group. So we're going to end up with some people who are benefiting from the work that the group does without chipping in. So when we find members of the potential group that actually join the interest group, that is what we call the actual group. So we've got to understand the difference between the potential group and the actual group. The potential group, everybody that could benefit from what the interest group is doing. The actual group are only the people that have joined the interest group in some way. So joining can be like registering with the group. It can be like paying dues to the group, donating to the group. It can be just like temporarily acting on behalf of the group. Like those people in the picture, they might not all be registered members of PETA, but they showed up to help in the protest here. So we'll count them as members of the actual group. The goal of an interest group is to get as many people from the potential group as possible to join the actual group. Obviously, the work that your group is doing is going to benefit tons and tons and tons of people. You want to make sure as many of those people know about the interest group and join the interest group by helping out in some way. When they don't, we end up with people that we call free riders. Free riders get the benefits of the interest group without participating in the work of the group. So these are people that fall into the potential group. They have never done anything to join the actual group. So they're getting the benefits of whatever the interest group works for, but they're not participating in the activities of the group. They're not registered or donating or showing up to events or anything like that. They're not helping the interest group achieve their goal, but they're benefiting when the interest groups do achieve their goal. Most people don't even know that they're free riding. Like we said, your members, you are probably a member of hundreds of potential groups. You are probably free riding off the efforts of hundreds of interest groups that you don't even know about. People might not even see the reason to join the group because they know that they're free riding. People don't necessarily think that they should join the group because they get the benefits anyway. So some people are free riding on purpose. Some people are free riding because they don't even know. But however, the bigger the potential group is, the larger the free rider problem the group's going to have. So we're going to take a look at that now when we talk about the differences between big groups and small groups. So the next thing we want to do is take a look at the difference between what big interest groups and small interest groups have to deal with. We were just talking about free riders, and here is an example of an interest group that probably has one of the largest free rider problems. That's the National Organization for Women. The potential group is huge. It's all the women in the world. But the actual group, meaning the members of the National Organization for Women, is very, very small comparatively. So let's take a look at the problems faced by big interest groups. Big interest groups have problems. Big interest groups mostly are going to have huge free rider problems. They're going to have much more difficulty getting all the people in the potential group into the actual group. So the bigger the interest group, probably it's going to end up with a bigger free rider problem than small groups. But they're going to have a hard time, even with their members, trying to get all their members to mobilize in the same way, to act together, to be able to coordinate all the members of their group in an effective way. That's difficult for a big group, especially think about the National Organization for Women. It's impossible to be able to get all of the members of the National Organization for Women on the same page. They'll each have different priorities and goals of their own. So big groups have a tough time mobilizing all of their members to act together. Also, a problem for big interest groups is they're more visible. One of the things we said yesterday is that the public, your average voter, your regular old public, they don't really think of interest groups as a good thing. Interest groups are seen as a negative force in politics for a lot of people. So the more visible an interest group is, the more difficult time they have dealing with negative attitudes from the public. So they have a harder time creating a positive image from the public. One of these big problems for large interest groups is the free rider problem. Free riders are very, very likely in the large interest groups. When this group is going after things, they're going after benefits for a large group, or they're going after the kinds of benefits that they can't keep away from all the free riders, there's not much of a reason for people to join the group. Okay, especially some of these big groups, like the AARP represents all old people. If they're out there fighting for to protect the rights of old people, there's a lot of old people out there that are going to think there's no reason for me to join this group. I get the benefits anyway. So big interest groups are going to have big free rider problems. The best way for interest groups to try to fight the free rider problem is what we call selective benefits. So the group, obviously, all interest groups want to minimize their free rider problem. They would like for the whole potential group to join the actual group if they can. So they want to make as few free riders as possible. So what a lot of interest groups do, they create what we call selective benefits, which means that these are benefits that they can restrict to only members of the actual group. So this is something that serves as an incentive for members of the actual group. And it serves as an incentive for people that are in the potential group to decide to actually join the actual group. It means that these people will see there's something that they can get if they join the group when otherwise they wouldn't have. So with selective benefits, it's a lot like voter turnout. If selective benefits cause even one person to join the interest group, then they have successfully reduced their free rider problem. And so this is a thing that a lot of interest groups will offer to try to lure members of the potential group to join the actual group. So thinking about small interest groups, they have it a little easier here. They may have an easier time even with their group members. With a small group, especially if there's a small potential group, any benefits that the interest group wins, anything that the interest group can push for and change, those benefits are going to be split among less people. So that means there's more benefits for each member of the group, and there's more incentive for each member of the potential group to join the actual group. An interest group that represents a small group of people and maybe represents a specific, a very, very specific interest of some kind, there's going to be a lot more incentive for those people to join the group. Because whatever the group wins is going to create even greater benefits from their group members. Small groups also, because of this, they're going to end up with less of a free rider problem. everything that was difficult for the big group becomes easier for the small groups. If the big group has trouble mobilizing all of its members, if you have a small interest group, it's easy to get all your members on the same page. It's going to be easier to coordinate all those people to make sure that everybody's working together. They're likely going to share the same interests. So the small group is going to have an easier time mobilizing their members, and the big groups, those had a difficult time getting all their members on the same page. The other problem with the big group is that they were visible, so people get upset about them and everything. These small interest groups, they're unlikely to be visible. They're unlikely to get a lot of attention in the media or attention from people at all. People aren't going to notice them. The small groups benefit this way. People don't notice them, and so people don't even think about them. People don't have negative thoughts about these small interest groups the way that people will have really negative attitudes towards large interest groups. When a group is going after some really specific interests, they're probably going to be pretty successful. The more specific of the interests that the group pursues, the more likely that they're going to have success, because they're going to be doing stuff. It's kind of like behind the scenes. It's so specific that your average person doesn't even pay attention to this. It's the kind of thing that you would definitely not click on an online news site. You would skip over in the newspaper. When we're talking about the very specific details of laws, the average person is not paying attention to this, but the members of the interest group definitely are. The influence that these groups have is going to seem invisible because it's not going to get any attention, because it's just such a tiny detail, something so boring. So when that happens, the influence that the interest group has is great. It's basically invisible. They don't get held back at all from negative reactions from the public. So a very small and specific interest group is going to have the most success influencing policy. All right, so we've talked about the differences between big groups and small groups, between potential groups and actual groups. Now we're going to go through some different categories of interest groups and talk about a lot of examples so that we can get more familiar with the interest groups we know and the kind of things that they're going to be able to do to influence policy.